A photograph of Lake Mead is a lie. Not a deliberate deception, just a total illusion born of stillness. You look at that blue water, the red rock, and the hard line of the Hoover Dam, and you just assume it's always going to be there. Like it's a permanent fixture on the map. It isn't. It's a bank account, and it's basically going broke. Right now, the city of Las Vegas is preparing for the day that account officially closes. The day the lake actually dies. That's not some crazy prediction or a worst-case scenario. It is the literal engineering assumption behind a project that cost $1.5 billion. It's hidden 500 feet beneath the ground at Saddle Island. Designed to do just one thing: keep pumping water long after the river stops flowing for everyone else. And here is the part nobody seems to get. For Las Vegas, this plan is already working. While Phoenix and Los Angeles are trapped in a political fight against gravity, Las Vegas simply built its way out. They drilled an escape hatch right into the bottom of the apocalypse. Here is the number you need to remember: 895 feet. That's the elevation above sea level, where Lake Mead enters what's called dead pool. This isn't dramatic shorthand. It's a precise technical designation for a genuinely catastrophic situation. When the lake surface hits 895 feet, the water drops below the lowest outlet point in the Hoover Dam. Water can't flow downstream by gravity anymore. The river just stops. It doesn't stop for a day or a season. It just stops. The concrete wedge of the Hoover Dam, which used to be this massive symbol of American ambition, becomes a plug, a tombstone for the lower Colorado River. At that exact moment, the 336-mile canal of the Central Arizona Project, which is the literal lifeline for Phoenix and Tucson, starts running dry. The aqueducts feeding Southern California's massive cities and farms begin to empty out. For them, 895 feet is day zero. It's the end of everything. But for Las Vegas, it's just a Tuesday. Because their straw goes deeper. To understand how this is even possible, you have to realize the sheer terror that gripped the Southern Nevada Water Authority back in the early 2000s. The water czar of Las Vegas, Pat Mulroy, looked at the same data everyone else had. 20 years of relentless, unbroken drought, with the lake level moving in only one direction. Down, she saw the city's two existing water intakes, basically two giant straws sipping from the lake, and realized they were becoming completely obsolete. The shrinking lake was going to leave them high and dry, sucking air. For a city in the middle of the Mojave Desert, that means game over. So Pat Mulroy made a decision that was so audacious and expensive, people thought she was borderline insane at the time. She decided that if the water was leaving, Las Vegas had to follow it down. The plan was called Intake Number 3, or the third straw. It wasn't an upgrade or a repair. It was a complete reimagining of how a city survives in a desert that's actively trying to kill it. The project started with a massive tunnel boring machine, this mechanical earthworm of hardened steel lowered into the earth. It had to dig a tunnel 3 miles long and 20 feet wide, right underneath the lake through solid rock. The engineering challenge was insane. The pressure from billions of tons of water overhead was immense, and the cost was staggering. Original estimates were around $700 million, but by the time they finished in September of 2015, the final price tag hit roughly $817 million. It was the most expensive public works project in Nevada's history, and it was still only half the solution. A deep straw is totally useless if you can't create suction. The bottom of intake number 3 sat so low in the lake bed that gravity alone couldn't push the water to the treatment plants. So they built a companion project called the Low Lake Level Pumping Station, or L3PS. This was the actual engine, costing another $650 million. Crews carved an underground chamber the size of a football stadium out of the rock near the shore. From there, they drilled 34 vertical well shafts, plunging 500 feet straight down to connect with the new intake tunnel. Inside those shafts, They installed 34 custom submersible pumps designed to lift 900 million gallons of water a day, straight up against gravity. They turned them on for the first time in April 2020, and by 2022, the system was fully integrated. The $1.5 billion insurance policy was officially live. And here is the number that changes everything and separates Las Vegas from its neighbors. The L3PS system is designed to pump water from a lake elevation of 875 feet. Think about that. Dead Pool, the point where the river dies for Arizona and California, is 895 feet. Las Vegas's pumps can keep running until the lake drops another 20 vertical feet below that. They can literally drink from a dead lake. Pat Mulroy put it pretty bluntly. She said that without the third intake, Southern Nevada would be shutting its doors, since the first straw is already out of the water. It wasn't about conservation anymore, it was pure survival. While Las Vegas was drilling, its neighbors were busy arguing. The water crisis on the Colorado isn't just about climate change, it's a crisis of law. It's a crisis born from a century of promises made on paper that the river could never actually keep. The foundational document, the Colorado River Compact, was signed back in 1922. It divided the water among 7 states based on flow data, recorded during one of the wettest periods in the last 500 years. The math was wrong from the start. There was never as much water as the states claimed. For decades, it didn't matter because the reservoirs were full. But as the drought took hold, the fine print in those old agreements started to matter a lot. No one feels this more than Arizona. To understand why Phoenix is in such a tight spot, you have to go back to 1968, when President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Colorado River Basin Project Act. This was Arizona's dream come true, authorizing federal money to build the Central Arizona Project Canal to carry water across the desert to Phoenix and Tucson. But there was a catch, a real devil's bargain. To get the money, Arizona had to agree that its rights to Colorado River water would be junior to California's. They were last in line. In the boom years, it seemed like a reasonable trade-off, just a technicality. Now, it's a loaded gun pointed straight at the state's future. Tom Bushotsky, the director of the Arizona Department of Water Resources, lives with the consequences of that 1968 decision every single day. His job is to defend Arizona's share of the water, but he's negotiating with an incredibly weak hand. The law is clear. When the federal government declares a shortage and imposes cuts, Arizona loses first, and they lose catastrophic amounts. Central Arizona farmers have already seen their water deliveries slashed to almost nothing, and the next round of cuts will hit the cities. Phoenix and Tucson are paying for a compromise made more than 50 years ago. They traded priority for a canal, and now that canal is at risk of becoming a 336-mile ditch. California, meanwhile, holds the best cards at the table. J.B. Hamby, California's Colorado River Commissioner, defends his state's senior water rights fiercely. California is the biggest user on the river, and their rights are the oldest. But even they can't ignore reality, because the lake keeps falling. In a sign of just how serious things are, the powerful Metropolitan Water District of Southern California agreed to a deal to voluntarily leave up to 200,000 acre-feet of their water in Lake Mead this year. This wasn't charity. The federal government is paying them $325 for every acre-foot they conserve, using money from the Inflation Reduction Act. That's up to $65 million. Think about how broken a system has to be when the government is paying the user with the most secure rights not to use their water, just to keep the whole thing from collapsing. It's a multi-million-dollar patch on a sinking ship, a temporary fix for a permanent problem of physics. While California gets paid to use less and Arizona braces for mandates, Las Vegas quietly relies on its $1.5 billion pumps. They aren't waiting for a bailout or hoping for rain. They're trusting their engineering. But the third straw isn't the only secret weapon Vegas has. The other one is even wilder. People call it the poop loop, and it's the reason why a city hosting 40 million tourists a year in the absolute driest desert in America has a virtually unlimited supply of indoor water. The concept is simple, but brilliant. Almost every drop of water that goes down an indoor drain in the Las Vegas Valley, whether it's from a shower on the 50th floor of a casino, a flushed toilet, or a kitchen sink, is captured. It flows into a highly sophisticated treatment system that purifies it to near distilled quality. Then, that treated water is channeled into the Las Vegas Wash, which flows directly back into Lake Mead. Here is the magic trick, under the rules of the river. Nevada gets credited for every gallon of water it returns to the lake. They call these return flow credits. For every gallon they put back, they're allowed to take another gallon out on top of their original allocation. This means indoor water use in Las Vegas is a completely closed loop. The water is used, treated, returned, and credited, making it almost infinitely recycled. This is what allows Nevada to stretch its tiny legal allocation of 300,000 acre-feet, the smallest share on the river, into a functional water budget of over 460,000 acre-feet. The Bellagio fountains look like an illusion of abundance, but the city's water recycling is the brutally efficient reality that pays for the whole show. It's a perfect system of conservation, hidden in plain sight. Phoenix and Los Angeles lose massive amounts of treated wastewater because it flows out to the ocean or gets used for other things. They don't get a one-for-one credit to pull more water from Lake Mead. Only Vegas perfected the loop. The brilliance of this strategy, the deep straw for security, and the return flow credits for efficiency puts Las Vegas in an incredibly strong position. But the battle for the Colorado River is entering a dangerous new phase. The rules that governed the river for the last 2 decades are expiring at the end of December 2026. Everything is on the table, and the states are locked in tense, bitter negotiations over what the new rules will look like. Who gets cut, by how much, and when? John Ensminger, the general manager of the SNWA, is Nevada's lead negotiator, trying to protect the advantage his predecessors built. The 3 lower basin states submitted a joint proposal to the federal government as a framework to provide more certainty for users. But certainty means different things depending on who you ask. For Arizona, it means not getting completely wiped out. For California, it means protecting their senior rights. For Nevada, it means making sure their infrastructure investment pays off. If they can't agree, the federal government will impose its own solution, a forced reckoning nobody wants. That December 31st, 2026 deadline looms over everything, and it's also the deadline for another major part of Las Vegas's water strategy. A Nevada law passed in 2021 mandated the removal of all non-functional turf in the valley. This is the decorative grass in street medians, outside office parks, and in neighborhood common areas. Grass that serves no purpose other than looking green while drinking massive amounts of water. By the end of 2026, it all has to go. The program has saved billions of gallons of water, but it has triggered a painful, unintended consequence. As property owners shut off the sprinklers to kill the lawn, they're accidentally killing thousands of mature shade trees. For decades, the root systems of these trees grew to depend on the steady irrigation meant for the grass. When that water stopped, the trees started dying. Lawsuits are being filed, and horticulturists are sounding the alarm. The effort to save water is now threatening to worsen the urban heat island effect, killing the exact trees that make the city livable in 115-degree heat. It's a brutal illustration of how complex this crisis really is. There are no easy answers, and every solution seems to create a new problem. Removing thirsty grass seems like an obvious win, but if it destroys the urban canopy and sends air conditioning demand skyrocketing, what did you actually gain? It shows that even for Las Vegas, the city that planned ahead and spent the money, the future has its own cruel ironies. They secured their water by drilling to the bottom of the lake, but on the surface. They're fighting a block-by-block battle over patches of grass and dying trees just to keep their engineered city a place where people can actually stand to live. So what's next? Lake Mead's water level sits at approximately 1,042.5 feet, and the Bureau of Reclamation projects it falling to around 1,037 feet by the end of the year. The trend line is unbroken, and the numbers keep sliding south. Below 950 feet, the turbines at Hoover Dam can't generate electricity reliably, threatening the power grid for millions. Below 895 feet, the river stops entirely for Phoenix and LA. And somewhere below that, at 875 feet, lies the absolute last-ditch lifeline for Las Vegas. The city of illusion, built on spectacle, survived by focusing on the most concrete and brutal of realities. They looked at a dying lake and didn't see a tragedy. They saw an engineering problem. They solved it with $1.5 billion, 3 miles of tunnel, and 34 pumps hidden deep in the earth. Phoenix is trapped by a legal document from 1968, and Los Angeles is cashing federal checks to postpone the inevitable. Las Vegas is just listening for the hum of its machinery. The quiet, constant